This was one of those weeks where I was working on a different video for today and then realized, oh, I should be changing things up. But in this case, it's because I remembered that the DC Fandome event was happening this weekend, so I should probably do something DC related. I used to often try and line up my video ideas with whatever pop culture thing was happening, but obviously most pop culture things have been on hold for a while, so it just kind of slipped my mind that something was actually happening. But this is a great opportunity for me to finally dig out a video that I've been wanting to make for a while, inspired by a comic that I read earlier this year that I really loved, Batman White Knight, where the Joker basically went, hey, I bet I could be a better hero for Gotham than Batman is. And then he does just that. So in today's episode, I'm going to redesign and rewrite the stories for a few different DC villains if they were to decide to become heroes, and more specifically, take the place of the heroes that they often fight against. I came up with a few concepts that I really liked for this episode a while ago, so I'm glad that I'm finally doing it. And obviously, it's always lots of fun playing with DC villains. So if you like that I'm doing something with them, make sure to leave a like, helps with algorithm stuff, and we can start in with our first character of the day, Miss Arlene Quinzell. Let's go. Arlene Quinzell was a month into her sessions with the Joker at Arkham Asylum. She was starting to have true feelings for the sadistic serial killer, and her inhibitions were lowering by the day. But one day, Joker stopped being the biggest name outlaw in the asylum. The police had finally captured and unmasked Gotham's greatest hero, the Dark Knight. Bruce Wayne was thrown into Arkham, and Arlene, appearing to have made some headway with Joker, was also given Bruce as a patient. He'd been deemed insane and disturbed for his vigilante actions over the past years, and to be fair, there was something to be said for his less than stellar mental state, but he surely wasn't insane. In her early sessions with Bruce, Arlene could see that he was in full control of his faculties, and he actually had many useful insights for her other patients, as he'd been up close and personal with many of them when they were at their worst. But most useful of all to her was all the insights he had on the Joker. He helped her see that Joker was manipulating her into loving him, all in a twisted plot to make her help him escape. It took her time to actually accept this, but in her later meetings with Joker, she started seeing all the proof she needed that Bruce was telling the truth. Along with that, outside Arkham Asylum, crime was running rampant in Gotham. Without the Dark Knight on patrol, the world was going more and more mad. That was why Arlene made the decision to do something herself, and luckily, Bruce was willing to help. From inside the asylum, that is. In their sessions, Bruce started giving Arlene all the information he had about the various crime families of Gotham. In her off hours, Arlene would meet up with Alfred, who had been charged with aiding a vigilante, but had avoided prison time. He provided Arlene with all Bruce's assets, so she could train, use his gadgets, and make herself her own agile, bulletproof crime-fighting suit. She was already a well-trained gymnast, so it was pretty easy for her to figure out how to become a good fighter. But Arlene wouldn't fight as a bat. Sure, criminals in the city feared the bat, but they also feared the unpredictable, monstrous nature of the Joker just as much, or maybe even more. And if Arlene was to be hunted by the police anyway, she didn't care if they thought she had ties to the Batman or Joker, so she became almost a blend of both. She would fight crime with the gadgets of the Bat, but with an eerie grin and a maniacal laugh, battering criminals with her comedically large mallet, similar to something the Joker had used in a past crime spree. But hers was padded just enough to incapacitate without actually killing. This continued on for quite some time, and because she'd gotten wise to the Joker's tricks, she never helped him escape from Arkham. So while she and Bruce worked to prove Bruce's sanity, he also continued advising her as she fought for Gotham as Wisecrack, the clown queen of the night. Now obviously it would have been fun to use the Joker as the villain that I take to take over being a hero in Gotham, but because the comic I was taking inspiration from for this was already a version of the Joker becoming a hero, I wanted to make sure I was doing something a bit more different, so Harley Quinn felt like a good fit. Plus, I'm excited for the announcements for the Suicide Squad game that's coming, so why not use a Suicide Squad character? And it was a lot of fun taking some design elements from Harley Quinn's classic villainy kind of suit and from some iterations of Batman armor to make this sort of superhero Harley with a bit of Joker-ish vibes to it. I also tried to make her superhero outfit more symmetrical. It's not necessarily a universal thing that hero suits will be more symmetrical than villains, but symmetry can give the character a little bit more of a stable feel to them. That might be overthinking it a little bit, but at the end of the day, I do like how this one turned out, and I think it's a good start to this video. After decades of battles against the tyrant Darkseid, the heroes of Earth found themselves at a stalemate. Darkseid had never achieved his goal of discovering all the pieces to the anti-life equation, and without it, he could never truly succeed at wiping out all life in the universe. But he was still strong enough to consistently wreak havoc on any civilizations he deemed in his way. This, of course, weighed most heavily on the Man of Steel. In spite of everything Darkseid had done through the years, Superman maintained that there could still be good found in even the darkest of souls. He'd had an idea tucked away for years, but never felt compelled enough to try it. But the time had finally come. You see, as there is an anti-life equation with which one can convince anyone that life is meaningless and turn them into a mindless drone under the control of the user, there is also a life equation, which does the opposite, revealing just how meaningful life in all its forms truly is. Superman had secretly learned the full formula years earlier, but had been concerned about the risks of using it. There was so much ambiguity around it as nobody else alive knew the code besides himself. If it was the antithesis to the anti-life equation, then using it on someone could essentially be like hypnosis and may not even be permanent. But it was still finally time to use it. They needed some kind of solution for Darkseid. Unknown to the rest of the Justice League, Superman went to Apokolips to confront Darkseid alone. He recited the equation, and at its end, a light so brilliant and bright it could be seen from the atmosphere erupted between them. When it cleared, two things were revealed. One, it had worked. Darkseid's cruel eyes now gleamed with hope and compassion and the desire to help preserve all life across the galaxy. How long this could last, though, was still unclear. And on top of that, the other thing revealed was that the Man of Steel was dead. Using the formula had been too much even for one as strong as him, and the act had wiped him out. Darkseid spent the next months using all the power that he'd previously utilized for evil to help those in need. But because the equation's user had died, Darkseid was slowly regaining control of himself, and parts of his past conscience started slipping back in. Darkseid was soon fully in control of himself once more, but that didn't mean he was unaffected by the last months. He'd seen all the hope and joy he'd been bringing to those he helped, and it touched even his blackened soul. Saving people had given him an even greater sense of meaning than his past, more villainous goals. From that fateful day on, Darkseid remained a hero. He even took up the colors of his past foe, Superman, to honor the man who'd helped show him the bright side of the universe and the value of life. The once death and destruction-obsessed brute turned into a new symbol of hope, helping those in need and showing everyone that even the darkest soul could turn good. The universe had a new protector in Brightside. Now that story obviously feels a little bit more cheesy, but I still kind of like how it came together. And for the drawing of this one, originally I'd been planning on having Darkseid kind of just floating up in a heroic Superman-y kind of pose, but then as I started drawing that, I was like, wait, flight isn't really an iconic part of Darkseid's abilities. I don't even know if he can do full-on flight, come to think of it, So I was like, okay, let's try something else. What's another heroic thing I could have him doing? And I just thought it would be fun to have him kind of lifting up some rubble and saving a kitten. In my head, it had kind of started as a joke, but obviously I ended up going with it. And as I just kept drawing it, I was like, wow, I really like how this one's coming together. Part of it is I could have him kind of illuminated from the front and a lot of darkness around him from the thing he's lifting up, causing shadows, so that added some nice contrast on him. Anyway, hope you like the story and drawing. Here is Brightside. David Kane was a pirate for hire, working under his father, Jesse Kane's, orders. They'd recently taken on jobs for the devious, active king of Atlantis, Orm. While they were raiding a military submarine on one of Orm's schemes, the band of pirates was attacked by the hero of the deep, Aquaman. David and his father fought surprisingly well, but they weren't enough for the hero, and the battle ended with Jesse pinned under a missile due to his own miscalculated attack in an attempt to kill Aquaman. The sub was filling up with water, and David tried to pull the missile off to free his dad, but it wouldn't budge, and David feared the worst. Then, to his surprise, Aquaman lifted the missile off to free Jesse and save him. This good deed did not go unpunished, as Jesse soon fled with his son to escape imprisonment, while Aquaman was distracted rescuing other sailors. But David couldn't help dwelling on that moment. In spite of them having tried to kill Aquaman and them raiding the sub, he'd still freed Jesse. They carried on pirating after that, as David felt a duty to continue helping his father, but he also started keeping more tabs on Orm's actions and his plans, as well as on Aquaman's heroics. David soon became more and more obsessed with Aquaman's actions and started thinking that he was wasting his own life with crime. The final nail in his crime career's coffin came when his father died on a mission for King Orm, who barely noticed that the pirate had passed. They were just tools to Orm. David decided it was time to turn on the treacherous king, but not before Orm came to him with one more mission. Orm offered David a job to kill Aquaman, giving him a crate of Atlantean weapons to do so. David accepted the offer, but had no intention of killing Aquaman. He used the Atlantean weapons to build himself a suit of armor perfect for fighting on all terrains. He then went to Aquaman and explained his whole situation, giving Aquaman every piece of information he had on Orm's treachery and crimes against his own throne. This information alone was enough for Aquaman and David to build a full-scale rebellion to overthrow Orm from the throne of Atlantis for good. They did so, and Aquaman was given the throne as the only other living heir. Of course, this meant that he'd be quite busy with his new kingly duties, and wouldn't have time for heroing work. Luckily, David had gotten a taste for heroics and took Aquaman's place, traveling the seas, protecting the oceans, and saving any in need in the depths of the Great Blue World. That is the story of the rise of the Aquamanta. Now, I knew that I had to use Black Manta for this episode because his design, both in the comics and how it's translated into the movie, is one of my favorite villain designs out there. And I knew that I wanted to take some elements for Aquaman and put them in there, a bit of his scaly yellow kind of colors. But the other thing that I knew I wanted to change was not make his face completely covered. I still wanted the I-beam things, so I have them on his forehead, but having a face completely covered by a really rigid mask can make someone look more villainous and threatening because you can't see any emotions on them. That's obviously a bit of a stereotype, but even if you think of a character like Spider-Man, who's got a full face cover, his eyes at least can still emote, so we can read emotions from him, making us more able to connect to him. I could have potentially done something like that with Black Manta here, but I decided instead just to have his face uncovered, besides a little, glowy plasma kind of thing. That is what gives him the ability to breathe underwater. It was definitely a fun design to play with. Maybe not my favorite of the episode, but in general I do like how it turned out. Here's the Aquamanta. This was one of those episodes where I think I actually had more fun with the stories. Writing these felt very similar to writing the stories for my Marvel DC Fusion episodes. They're obviously more time-consuming than writing the lore for the Dragon episodes or something, but still super fun to do. If you're new to the channel, make sure to check out a bunch of my other DC characters stuff. I recently did a couple episodes of What If the Justice League Were Transformers. As mentioned, I've done a ton of DC Marvel Fusion episodes with Justice League and Avengers and their villains, Teen Titans and X-Men, and of course the DC Fandome's given me some good fuel for other video ideas I could be doing sometime soon. But that's all for today. I'm Christian Pearson. This has been PopCross Studios, home of the nerdiest art videos on YouTube. Thanks so much for watching, everybody, and I will see you all in the next one. Goodbye.